My name is Alexis, and at 29 years old, I finally achieved my dream of having my own apartment in Seattle. After years of hard work as a software engineer, I created a cozy space that was all mine. That is until I came home from work one evening to find my sister Bianca asleep in my bed, her belongings scattered throughout my sacred space. Before I tell you how I discovered my family's betrayal and why I had to take legal action, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family members who crossed your boundaries. Growing up in my family was always challenging. My parents, Harold and Margaret, made it clear from early on that my younger sister Bianca was the favorite. My father worked as an accountant, bringing his controlling nature home from the office. Every dollar I earned from babysitting or summer jobs was scrutinized, while Bianca received generous allowances without question. My mother, a homemaker with a talent for passive-aggressive comments, constantly reminded me that as the older sister, I needed to help Bianca. This help extended to everything from sharing my clothes without permission to covering her expenses when she overspent her allowance. By the time I was 17, I became accustomed to bailing Bianca out of trouble. When she crashed her first car 3 months after getting her license, my parents suggested I give her my reliable used Honda that I had saved for over 2 years to buy. When I refused, the cold shoulder treatment lasted for weeks. Bianca, now 26, never developed responsibility or independence. Throughout her life, she bounced between retail jobs, quitting whenever the work became too stressful. She dropped out of community college twice, each time with my parents making excuses about how the environment wasn't nurturing enough. Meanwhile, they barely acknowledged when I graduated with honors in computer science. The pattern continued into adulthood. Bianca could never hold an apartment for longer than 6 months. Either she would fail to pay rent, violate lease terms with parties, or clash with roommates who expected her to clean up after herself. Each time my parents would rush to her rescue, paying off landlords or moving her back home temporarily. They also expected me to offer financial support, which I did, until I realized I was enabling her behavior just as they were. My journey to independence was hard-earned. Unlike Bianca, I received no financial support for college. I worked 30 hours a week while maintaining a full course load, often surviving on ramen and coffee. After graduation, I landed an entry-level software engineering position at a tech startup. The salary was modest, but it was enough to share an apartment with 3 roommates in a less desirable part of the city. For 4 years, I lived frugally, taking on extra freelance projects and gradually climbing the career ladder. I packed lunches, skipped vacations, and tracked every expense in a detailed spreadsheet. My goal remained fixed in my mind, a place of my own, where I could establish the peace and order that had been missing throughout my childhood. 8 months ago, I finally signed the lease on my 1-bedroom apartment. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. I spent weekends scouring thrift stores and discount retailers for furniture that expressed my style. I painted an accent wall in the living room, a rich teal color hung string lights around the windows, and splurged on a quality mattress. For the first time, I created a space that reflected who I was, not what others expected me to be. As my independence grew, I established clearer boundaries with my family. Sunday dinners at their house once a week seemed manageable, though even those brief visits often left me emotionally drained. My father would interrogate me about my savings and retirement plans, suggesting I was being irresponsible by living alone instead of with roommates. My mother would comment on my appearance, implying that my focus on career was making me look tired and old before your time. Bianca usually arrived late, if at all, yet faced no criticism. The most significant boundary I established was financial. After calculating how much money I had given Bianca over the years in loans that were never repaid, I was shocked to discover it exceeded $15,000. I made it clear that my bank account was no longer available for emergencies of her creation. This decision was met with accusations of selfishness and lack of family loyalty. 3 weeks before the incident that changed everything, I attended the usual Sunday dinner. Bianca arrived halfway through the meal, her eyes puffy from crying. Between dramatic sobs, she announced she was being evicted from her current apartment because her roommate was totally psycho about rent being late. My parents exchanged meaningful glances before my father cleared his throat and mentioned that Bianca would be staying with them just until she gets back on her feet. I felt a wave of relief that they hadn't asked me to take her in. Looking back, I should have recognized the calculated looks they exchanged. I should have noticed how my mother asked seemingly innocent questions about my work schedule and when I would be traveling next. I should have been suspicious when my father offered to help install some shelves in my apartment and asked to borrow my keys for measurements. But I was too focused on maintaining the fragile peace and protecting my hard-won independence to see the warning signs. I had no idea that my small acts of trust would soon lead to the complete invasion of the sanctuary I had worked so hard to create. It was a Tuesday when my world turned upside down. The day started normally enough. I woke at 6:30, went for a quick jog around the neighborhood, showered, and caught the bus to the tech campus where I worked. My team was in the final push before a major software release, so I was fully absorbed in debugging code and running tests. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patel, my elderly neighbor, from across the hall. "Your sister seems nice. Do you need help moving the rest of her things in? I notice she has quite a lot of boxes." I stared at the message, confusion turning quickly to alarm. I had no sister moving in. I lived alone, and I had no plans to change that arrangement. With shaking hands, I texted back asking for clarification, but Mrs. Patel did not respond. I immediately called my supervisor, mumbled something about a home emergency, and rushed out of the building. The 30-minute bus ride felt like hours. My mind raced with possibilities. Had Mrs. Patel confused me with another resident? Was someone breaking into my apartment disguised as a moving operation? Could Bianca have somehow convinced my landlord she lived with me? None of the scenarios made sense, but the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing minute. When I finally arrived at my apartment building, I noticed nothing unusual in the lobby. The elevator ride to the 4th floor seemed interminable. As I approached my door, I saw no signs of disturbance, but when I inserted my key, I realized the door was already unlocked. My heart pounding, I pushed it open. The sight that greeted me was surreal. The living room looked mostly the same, except for a large pink suitcase leaning against my bookshelf and an unfamiliar jacket thrown over my carefully chosen armchair. I moved in stunned silence through the space I no longer recognized as entirely mine. In the kitchen, the refrigerator door was plastered with tacky magnets holding up takeout menus. Inside, my carefully prepared meal prep containers had been pushed aside to make room for wine coolers and fast food leftovers. The bathroom was even worse. Makeup products covered the entire counter, my toiletries shoved into a corner. Unfamiliar towels hung from the rack. A pair of wet leggings draped over the shower curtain rod. But the true violation awaited me in the bedroom. There, sprawled across my bed, in a tangle of my favorite sheets, lay Bianca, mouth open, snoring lightly, an eye mask pushed up on her forehead. She looked completely at home, as if this invasion was the most natural thing in the world. Next to the bed, a small bedside table that had not been there before held her phone, a glass of water, and a framed photo of her with friends. The horrible realization crashed over me someone had made copies of my keys. This was not a temporary visit or a misunderstanding. This was a calculated takeover of my personal space. I felt physically ill, my safe haven transformed into a scene of violation in my absence. "Bianca," I said sharply, my voice cutting through her peaceful slumber. "Bianca, wake up right now." She stirred slowly, squinting up at me with confusion before recognition dawned. "Oh, hey," she yawned, stretching luxuriously across my memory foam mattress. "You're home early. I thought you worked until 6 on Tuesdays." Her casual tone, as if her presence in my bedroom was completely normal, left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it emerged as a strangled whisper. "What are you doing here? How did you get into my apartment?" Bianca sat up, pushing her tangled hair from her face. "Mom and Dad said it would be fine. They helped me move some stuff in yesterday and the rest today." She gestured vaguely toward the living room. "I put most of my things against the wall, so they are not in your way." "Mom and Dad said it would be fine," I repeated, my shock giving way to anger. "This is my apartment. They cannot give permission for anyone, including you, to move in here." Bianca rolled her eyes as if I was being needlessly dramatic. "They have keys, you know. They made copies when you asked them to water your plants during your business trip to Portland last month." The pieces clicked into place. I had indeed trusted my parents with a key during my 3-day trip, expecting them to return it when I came back. They had returned a key, but apparently not before making unauthorized copies for themselves, and now evidently for Bianca as well. "You need to leave," I said firmly, though inside I was shaking. "Pack your things right now. This is illegal. You cannot stay here." Bianca looked genuinely surprised by my reaction. "Don't be ridiculous. Mom and Dad said I could stay as long as I needed. They said you have all this space to yourself and family helps family." She flopped back onto the pillows. "Besides, I already updated my address with work and everything. It is all settled." "Updated your address?" I felt like I might hyperventilate. "Nothing is settled. This is my home that I pay for. You cannot just move in without my permission." "Well, I cannot leave now," she said with finality. "All my stuff is here, and I gave up my other place." "You would not throw your own sister out on the street, would you?" She asked this as if it was the most unreasonable concept imaginable, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. I stood there, my mind racing between options. I could physically try to remove her and her belongings, but Bianca had always been skilled at turning situations into dramatic scenes where she emerged as the victim. I could call the police immediately, but some irrational part of me still hoped to resolve this within the family. Perhaps my parents had simply overstepped without realizing the seriousness of their actions. "I need to call Mom and Dad," I said finally, stepping out of the bedroom to collect myself. "Whatever Bianca called after me, they will tell you the same thing. And I am taking a nap now, so keep it down, okay? I had a really exhausting day moving." In the living room, I noticed more details of the invasion: Bianca's laptop on my desk, her shoes scattered by the door, a nail polish bottle, already leaving a purple stain on my coffee table. The space I had carefully curated to be my sanctuary now felt foreign and hostile. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and called my parents, praying that this was all some tremendous misunderstanding. My father answered on the 4th ring, his tone casual as if this was just another weekday call. "Alexis, is everything all right?" "No, everything is not all right," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "I just came home to find Bianca has moved into my apartment without my permission. She says you and Mom gave her keys and told her she could live here." There was a brief pause, and I heard my mother's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. My father's response sent a chill through me. "Well, of course we helped her move in. family helps family, Alexis. You have that whole apartment to yourself while your sister was facing homelessness. What were we supposed to do? Ask me. Respect my personal space and property. Not make illegal copies of my keys. The words tumbled out each one, fueled by growing indignation. Do not be so dramatic, my father scoffed. We are not strangers breaking in. We are your parents. And Bianca needs a stable environment right now. That apartment is plenty big enough for both of you. That is not the point. This is my home that I pay for. You had no right to move her in without even discussing it with me first. My mother came on the line then, her voice taking on that wounded tone she used when playing the victim. After all we have done for you, this is how you repay us. By turning your back on your sister when she needs you, we raised you better than this, Alexis. What you have done is illegal, I insisted. I want you to come get Bianca and all her things today. Absolutely not, my father barked. She is staying put. You will just have to be an adult about this and make it work. If you care about this family at all, you will help your sister get back on her feet. And how long is that supposed to take? I demanded. A week, a month, forever. As long as necessary, my mother interjected. Really, Alexis, this selfish streak of yours is very unattractive. Your sister would do the same for you. We both knew that was a lie. Bianca had never done anything for me that did not ultimately benefit her more. After another 10 minutes of circular arguments, guilt trips, and thinly veiled threats about being cut off from the family, I ended the call no closer to a resolution. My parents refused to come get Bianca or her belongings, essentially leaving me with an unwanted roommate who had been given permission by them to ignore any boundaries I might try to establish. That first night was excruciating. After my parents refused to intervene, I tried reasoning with Bianca again, explaining that while I understood she needed help moving in without my consent, was not acceptable. She barely looked up from her phone, mumbling that it was already done, and I should stop being so uptight. When I retreated to my bedroom to gather my thoughts, I discovered she had already reorganized my closet to make room for her clothes, pushing my carefully hung work attire to one cramped section. My dresser drawers had been partially emptied, my items jumbled together to create space for her things. Around 7, Bianca took over the living room, turning the television volume up to watch reality shows while scrolling through social media. When I mentioned I usually worked on my laptop in that space, in the evenings she suggested I use the kitchen table or something. She then proceeded to eat the meal prep food I had prepared for my lunches that week, commenting that it was kind of bland, but better than nothing. By 9:30, she had invited 2 friends over, without asking all 3 of them, talking loudly and mixing drinks in my kitchen. When I objected, she rolled her eyes and said, "It is just a couple of friends. Do not be such a buzzkill." I retreated to my bedroom, but sleep was impossible with the noise. Around midnight, I emerged to find empty wine bottles, pizza boxes, and the lingering smell of cigarettes, despite my apartment's strict no-smoking policy. Bianca and her friends had left for a club, not bothering to clean up or even lock the door properly. The next morning, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, I called my best friend Zoe before work. "This is absolutely insane," she said, after I explained the situation. "You know this is breaking and entering, right? And your parents facilitated it. You could press charges against my own family." The thought made my stomach clench despite my anger. "They did not respect that you are family when they did this," Zoe pointed out. "Look, my cousin is a lawyer. At minimum, you need to document everything and change your locks immediately." At work, I confided in my coworker Jordan, who had mentioned dealing with a boundary-pushing roommate in the past. His eyes widened as I described the situation. That is not just boundary pushing, that is a straight-up home invasion, he said. You need to treat this like the crime it is, because that is exactly what happened here. During my lunch break, I researched tenant rights and illegal entry laws in Washington state. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions, making unauthorized key copies, entering without permission, and moving someone in without the leaseholder's consent were all illegal actions. My landlord could potentially evict me if an unauthorized tenant was discovered living in the unit. When I returned home that evening, I attempted to establish some ground rules with Bianca. I wrote them out clearly. No guests without asking, quiet hours after 10 shared spaces kept clean. No using my personal items without permission, and contributing to groceries and utilities. She glanced at the list, laughed, and let it float to the floor. Yeah, I am not really a rules person, she said before returning to her video chat with a friend. That night, she used my expensive skincare products, leaving the caps off so they dried out. She borrowed my laptop charger because hers was somewhere in a box. She took a long shower at 6 a.m., using all the hot water before my alarm even went off. Each violation was met with a casual shrug or an eye roll when I pointed it out. By day 3, I was at my breaking point. I offered to help Bianca find her own place, even suggesting I could assist with the security deposit if necessary. Why would I want my own place when this one is so nice, she responded. Besides, Mom and Dad said you cannot kick me out because I am established as a resident now or something. That is not how it works, I explained, trying to maintain my composure. You are not on the lease. You have no legal right to be here. Whatever. Mom and Dad said you are just being difficult and I should stay put. They said you will get over it eventually. She turned back to her phone, dismissing me entirely. I gave her a deadline, 3 days to make arrangements and move out, or I would be forced to take more serious action. She laughed in my face. What are you going to do? Call the cops on your own sister? That would destroy Mom and Dad. You would never do that to the family. Her confidence in her position and in my unwillingness to truly stand up for myself was perhaps the most infuriating part. She was right that I had always backed down in the past when pushed by my family. But she had miscalculated badly this time. This was not about borrowing a sweater without asking or guilting me into covering her portion of a dinner bill. This was my home, my safe space, the physical manifestation of all my hard work and independence. And I was not going to let them take it from me without a fight. The next week was an exercise in escalating violations. Each day brought new evidence that Bianca had no intention of respecting my space or belongings. On Monday, I returned from work to find her wearing my favorite dress, the one I had been saving for an important client meeting. When I confronted her, she shrugged and said, "It looks better on me anyway." The dress now had a small wine stain on the sleeve. Tuesday, I discovered a stranger asleep on my couch when I went to the kitchen for breakfast. Bianca later explained he was just a friend who needed a place to crash. Wednesday brought 2 more unknown guests, using my shower and eating the groceries I had just purchased. By Thursday, I realized my gold necklace from our grandmother was missing from my jewelry box, along with $60 from the emergency cash I kept in my desk. When questioned about these items, Bianca feigned ignorance. Maybe you lost them. You have been pretty scattered lately. Her gaslighting was infuriating, but I had no proof she had taken anything, just the unsettling knowledge that things kept disappearing. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Bianca hosted late-night gatherings that stretched until 2 or 3 in the morning, despite my repeated reminders that I had to be up at 6 for work. The noise, the constant presence of strangers, and the steady dismantling of my personal boundaries left me exhausted and increasingly desperate. On Friday evening, just as I was contemplating spending money I did not have on a hotel room just to get some sleep, my parents showed up unannounced. My mother bustled in with shopping bags, not bothering to knock or announce their arrival. "We thought we would check in on our girls," she said cheerfully, as if this was a planned family visit rather than another boundary violation. "I brought some groceries and those cookies you liked as a child, Alexis." My father followed behind her, immediately inspecting the apartment with a critical eye. "This place could use a man's touch," he declared, moving my carefully positioned floor lamp to a corner where it provided no useful light. "Have you considered getting a bigger television? This one seems inadequate for two people." The casual assumption that Bianca's presence was now permanent made my blood run cold. Before I could respond, Bianca emerged from my bedroom, greeting our parents with enthusiasm. "I was just about to call you," she gushed. "The closet space here is so limited. I was thinking maybe we could convert part of the living room into a wardrobe area for me." "That is a wonderful idea," my mother agreed already, eyeing the bookshelf that held my cherished collection of novels and technical manuals. "Alexis hardly uses this space anyway, always working or at the gym." They continued this conversation, as if I was not even present, discussing my apartment, as though it was a shared family property open to renovation. When I finally managed to interject, pointing out that any changes would need my approval, as the leaseholder, my father fixed me with the stern look he had used throughout my childhood to silence dissent. "Family helps family, Alexis," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your sister needs stability right now, and you have more than enough space here." In fact, he glanced around with a calculating expression. "It makes more sense for Bianca to take the bedroom, since she has more things. You could easily make do with the sofa bed we could buy for the living room." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to give up my bedroom in my own apartment that I pay for?" "Do not be selfish," my mother chimed in, already rearranging my decorative pillows without permission. "Your sister has been through so much lately, with her breakup and job situation. The least you could do is make her comfortable." Their visit lasted 2 excruciating hours, during which they continued to rearrange my furniture, critique my decorating choices, and make plans for Bianca's permanent setup. They spoke about installing additional shelving, replacing my desk with a vanity for Bianca, and even painting the walls a color she preferred. Not once did they acknowledge that this was my space, or that I had any say in these decisions. After they finally left, promising to return on Sunday with supplies for the renovation, I sat in stunned silence while Bianca cheerfully outlined her plans for our apartment. The reality of the situation crashed down on me. This was not a temporary imposition. They fully intended to take over my space indefinitely, with no regard for my feelings or rights. The final straw came the next morning. I had an important virtual meeting scheduled with clients requiring my home office setup with the external monitor and professional background I had carefully arranged. I woke early to prepare, only to discover my entire home office had been dismantled overnight. My desk had been pushed against the wall, the monitor unplugged and moved to the floor. My organized work documents were scattered, some bearing coffee stains. In place of my workspace was a makeshift vanity with Bianca's extensive makeup collection spread across the surface. My desk chair now held a pile of her laundry. "What happened to my office?" I demanded, finding Bianca in the kitchen, calmly making coffee. "I needed the desk space for my makeup," she replied with a shrug. "You can work from the kitchen table. Or, better yet, just go to your actual office. That is what offices are for, right?" "I have a client meeting in 30 minutes. I need my setup." I was nearly shouting now, panic rising, as I calculated how quickly I could reassemble everything. "Not my problem," she said, pouring coffee into my favorite mug. "Maybe you should have mentioned it earlier." As I frantically tried to reconnect my equipment, I discovered my work laptop had been moved as well, important documents shoved carelessly into a drawer. In my search for missing cables, I found something that stopped me cold: a folder containing my personal banking documents, rental agreement, and tax returns, all of which I kept in a locked file box. The lock had been forced open, the contents rifled through. "Why are my personal financial documents out?" I asked, holding up the folder with shaking hands. Bianca at least had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. "Mom and Dad needed some information. Something about adding me to the lease or whatever." Adding you to the lease. Without my permission, the room seemed to spin around me. "That is fraud, Bianca. That is literally fraud." "Do not be so dramatic. Dad said it is just a formality since I live here now." She waved dismissively. "Anyway, I am going out. Good luck with your meeting or whatever." She left me standing there surrounded by the chaos she had created, the implications of what she had just revealed sinking in. My parents were not just enabling Bianca's invasion of my space. They were actively trying to establish her legal right to be there, potentially jeopardizing my lease and rental history in the process. I locked myself in the bathroom, the only place that still afforded any privacy, though even there Bianca's belongings encroached on every surface. Sitting on the edge of the bathtub, I finally allowed myself to break down. The tears came in violent, silent sobs that shook my entire body. This was not just about an inconsiderate houseguest or family overstepping boundaries. This was a coordinated attack on my independence, my personal space, and my legal standing as a tenant. When the tears subsided, a cold clarity took their place. Reasoning would not work. Compromise was impossible. My family had shown they had no respect for me, my space, or my legal rights. If they were willing to potentially commit fraud to solidify Bianca's position in my apartment, there was no telling what else they might do. With trembling fingers, I called my landlord, Arthur Reeves. When he answered, I explained the situation as calmly as I could, emphasizing that I had not given permission for anyone to live with me or be added to the lease. His response confirmed my worst fears. "I received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be your father," Arthur said, concern evident in his voice. "He inquired about adding another tenant to your lease. I explained we would need your signature and approval, and he assured me that would not be a problem." "This is very concerning, Alexis. Unauthorized occupants violate your lease terms and could result in eviction proceedings." The thought of losing my apartment because of my family's actions was the final push I needed. This was no longer a family dispute to be handled with patience and compromise. This was a legal matter requiring immediate and decisive action. "Thank you for telling me," I said to Arthur. "I will handle this situation immediately. Please do not accept any documentation regarding my lease unless it comes directly from me with my signature in person." After ending the call, I sat for a long moment, contemplating the magnitude of what I was about to do. Then, with newfound resolve, I made another call, this time to a tenant rights attorney whose information I had saved during my research earlier in the week. The path forward was clear, if painful. My family had forced my hand, and now they would face the consequences of their actions. No more negotiations, no more attempts at compromise. It was time to reclaim my space and my independence by legal means if necessary. The attorney I called, Eleanor Winters, agreed to see me that same afternoon. I rescheduled my client meeting, claiming a family emergency which was not far from the truth. Arriving at her downtown office, I was a bundle of nerves, still questioning if taking legal action against my own family was an overreaction. Eleanor, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, listened intently as I outlined the entire situation, occasionally taking notes or asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "What your family has done constitutes several violations of the law," she stated plainly. "Unauthorized key duplication, illegal entry, trespassing, potential identity theft, given the access to your financial documents, and attempted lease fraud. These are not minor infractions, Alexis. These are serious invasions of your legal rights." She outlined my options with clinical precision. I could pursue a restraining order against all three family members, file criminal charges for the illegal entry and potential fraud, or initiate a civil suit for damages. Each path had different implications and requirements. "The most immediate concern is securing your apartment," Eleanor advised. "You need to change the locks today, with your landlord's permission, of course. You should also document everything. Take photographs of the current state of your apartment and any damage. Save text messages or emails that demonstrate they knew they were acting without your consent. If you have a building with security cameras, request footage showing when they moved Bianca's belongings in." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of validation and sorrow. It was both comforting and devastating to have a legal professional confirm that my family's actions were not just hurtful, but criminal. Part of me had still hoped I was overreacting, that there might be a simple solution that did not involve legal consequences for my parents and sister. "What about Bianca's claim that she cannot be removed because she is now a resident?" I asked, remembering her confident assertion. Eleanor shook her head firmly. "In Washington state, to establish tenancy, there needs to be an agreement with the actual leaseholder, which is you. Your parents cannot create tenancy on your behalf without your consent. Since Bianca has only been there for a short time and has not established legal residency through proper channels, you have every right to have her removed as a trespasser." I left Eleanor's office with a clear action plan and her card in my pocket. My first call was to Arthur, explaining the situation in full and requesting permission to change the locks immediately. He was sympathetic and agreed readily, even offering to arrange for the locksmith himself and expedite the process given the circumstances. Next, I went through my phone, taking screenshots of all relevant text messages, including Bianca's casual admission that our parents had made copies of my keys without permission. I contacted the building manager to request security footage from the days when Bianca's belongings were moved in. By the time I returned to my apartment, a locksmith was already finishing up the new deadbolt installation. Arthur had also arranged for a maintenance worker to install a simple security camera above my door, angled to capture anyone approaching or entering. Inside, I systematically photographed every room, documenting the displacement of my belongings, the damage to several items, and the overall takeover of my space. I created an inventory of missing or damaged items, the stained dress, the missing jewelry, and cash, my expensive skincare products. Now empty the coffee-stained work documents. With the physical security measures in place, I contacted building security and provided them with photos of my parents and Bianca, explaining that they were not authorized to enter my apartment under any circumstances. If they attempted to do so, security was to contact me immediately, and if necessary, the police. The final preparation was perhaps the most difficult. Following Eleanor's advice, I filed a police report detailing the unauthorized key duplication, illegal entry, and trespassing. The officer who took my statement was professional and non-judgmental, even when I explained I was reporting my own family members. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of thing more often than you might think," he told me. "Family disputes over property and boundaries can get complicated. You are doing the right thing by addressing it through proper legal channels." With all preparations complete, I waited. Bianca had been out all day, presumably expecting to return to the apartment whenever she pleased, just as she had been doing. My parents had mentioned coming by on Sunday with their renovation supplies. I was as ready as I could be for the confrontation that would inevitably come. It was nearly midnight when my phone rang with a call from building security. "Miss Reynolds, your sister is attempting to enter your apartment, but her key is not working. She is becoming quite agitated. Would you like us to send her away? Or would you prefer to come down and speak with her?" "Please ask her to wait in the lobby," I replied. "I will be down shortly, and I will have police officers with me." True to Eleanor's advice, I had arranged for police presence during this confrontation. 2 officers met me in the lobby, where a furious Bianca was pacing back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. "What did you do to the locks?" she demanded when she saw me. "I have been trying to get in for 20 minutes. I had to call security like some kind of visitor." "Bianca," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "these officers are here because you have been living in my apartment without my permission. The locks have been changed because you and our parents made unauthorized copies of my keys, which is illegal." Her face fluctuated between shock and rage. "You called the cops on me, your own sister. Are you insane? Your living arrangement was never authorized by me, the legal tenant," I continued, trying to stick to the facts as Eleanor had advised. "You need to collect your belongings and leave." "I am not going anywhere," she snarled, turning to the officers. "This is my apartment too. I live here now." The older officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you on the lease for this apartment?" "No, but my parents set this up with her." "Ask them." She gestured wildly at her phone. "They are on their way right now." That explained the phone call. Within 15 minutes, my parents' car screeched into the apartment parking lot. They rushed in, my father's face purple with rage, my mother already in tears. "What is the meaning of this?" my father bellowed, addressing the officers rather than me. "Why are you harassing my daughters?" The officers calmly explained the situation. I was the only legal tenant of the apartment. I had not given permission for Bianca to live there, and the unauthorized key duplication constituted a crime. My mother turned to me, her expression a mixture of hurt and manipulation that I had seen countless times before. "How could you do this to your family after everything we have done for you?" "What you have done is break the law," I replied, surprising myself with my composure. "You made copies of my keys without permission, moved Bianca in without asking me, and then tried to add her to my lease without my consent." "We were helping your sister," my father shouted. "That is what families do. They help each other." "Sir, I need you to lower your voice," one of the officers warned. "We are here to facilitate a peaceful resolution. Your daughter Alexis has filed a police report regarding illegal entry and trespassing. She has the legal right to determine who lives in her apartment." "This is ridiculous," my father scoffed. "We are not trespassers. We are her parents." "The law does not make exceptions for family members," the officer explained patiently. "Unauthorized entry is still illegal entry." The conversation continued in circles, with my parents alternating between threats, guilt trips, and attempts to minimize their actions. The officers maintained a professional demeanor throughout, repeatedly explaining the legal realities of the situation. Bianca vacillated between angry outbursts and tearful pleas, accusing me of betrayal and heartlessness. Finally, the officers suggested we move upstairs to collect Bianca's belongings, as the lobby was not an appropriate place for this discussion. My parents insisted on accompanying us despite my objection. The officers agreed, but warned that any aggressive behavior would result in their removal from the building. Once inside my apartment, things escalated quickly. My father, seeing the new locks and the security camera, turned on me with renewed fury. "You think you can lock out your own family after everything we have sacrificed for you?" "Sir, I asked you to remain calm," the officer reminded him. My mother began dramatically gathering Bianca's things, making a show of how difficult and unreasonable I was being. "I cannot believe you would put your own sister out on the street," she wept, ignoring the fact that Bianca could easily return to their home. Bianca herself stomped around the apartment, grabbing items indiscriminately, including several that belonged to me. When I pointed this out, she sneered, "Consider it payment for my emotional distress." The officers intervened, ensuring she returned my property. The tension in the apartment was suffocating years of dysfunctional family dynamics compressed into my small living space. The breaking point came when my father discovered the police report I had filed, which was sitting on my kitchen counter. He snatched it up, read it quickly, and then advanced toward me, his face contorted with rage. "You filed charges against us, your own parents, you ungrateful, selfish child." He took another step toward me, his finger jabbing the air inches from my face. One of the officers immediately stepped between us. "Sir, I need you to step back right now." Instead of complying, my father attempted to push past the officer, still shouting accusations at me. The officer grabbed his arm, warning him to calm down. My father's response was to try to wrench free, inadvertently striking the officer in the process. What followed seemed to happen in slow motion. The officers moved quickly, restraining my father and informing him he was under arrest for assaulting a police officer. My mother screamed, rushing toward them, only to be held back by the second officer. Bianca, seeing our parents being restrained, completely lost control, lunging at me with a shriek of rage. She managed to scratch my cheek before an officer pulled her away, adding another charge of assault to the growing list of offenses. Within minutes, all three of my family members were in handcuffs, being read their rights in my living room. My father continued to shout threats and accusations. My mother wept dramatically, begging the officers to understand it was all a misunderstanding. Bianca alternated between sobbing and hurling insults at me. As they were led out of my apartment, I stood in stunned silence, my cheek stinging from Bianca's scratch, watching as my family was taken into police custody. This was not how I had envisioned the confrontation ending. I had wanted them to understand boundaries, to recognize the seriousness of their actions, to perhaps even apologize. Instead, their inability to accept responsibility or respect legal boundaries had resulted in their arrest. The apartment fell silent after they left, the absence of chaos almost as disorienting as its presence had been. I sank onto my sofa, surrounded by the disarray of the confrontation, feeling simultaneously victorious and devastated. I had stood my ground and reclaimed my space. But at what cost? The relationships with my family, as dysfunctional as they were, might never recover from this. Yet beneath the guilt and uncertainty, there was a small growing sense of relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a firm boundary with my family and enforced it despite their manipulation and pressure. The locks were changed, the security camera was in place, and my apartment was once again my own. It was a painful victory, but a victory nonetheless. The days following the arrests were a blur of legal proceedings, frantic phone calls, and emotional turbulence. My parents and Bianca were released on bail the following day, with court dates set for the various charges they faced. Within hours of their release, my phone began lighting up with calls and texts, not just from them, but from extended family members who had received a heavily edited version of events. The harassment became so intense that I was forced to change my phone number, providing the new one only to close friends, my workplace, and my attorney. Even with this precaution, messages found their way to me through social media, email, and even notes left at my workplace reception desk. The narrative my parents spread painted me as mentally unstable, ungrateful, and cruel, turning family members who had never been particularly close to me against me entirely. Aunts I saw once a year at holidays called to express their disappointment. Cousins I had played with as a child sent scathing messages about family loyalty. The weight of being cast as the villain in my own story was almost unbearable. I took a week of emergency leave from work, partly to deal with the legal aftermath, and partly because I could not focus with so much chaos swirling around me. My boss, understanding but concerned, approved the time off with the caveat that I would need to make up the project deadlines upon my return. Those days alone in my apartment were both healing and difficult. I spent hours cleaning, rearranging, and reclaiming my space. The scratch on my cheek from Bianca healed, but deeper wounds remained open. I scrubbed away coffee stains, repaired what could be fixed, and carefully documented what was permanently damaged for the restitution claim. Eleanor advised me to file. A meeting with Arthur, my landlord, confirmed that my lease was secure, though he recommended additional security measures given the situation. He installed a peephole camera that would allow me to see who was at my door from my phone, an unexpected kindness that brought me to tears of gratitude. The legal process moved forward with methodical precision. A temporary restraining order was granted almost immediately, preventing my parents and Bianca from coming within 100 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. The court date for the permanent order was set for 3 weeks later, giving both sides time to prepare. My parents hired an expensive attorney who contacted Eleanor with a settlement offer. They would pay for the damages to my apartment if I dropped all charges and the restraining order. The implication was clear: they were still trying to control the situation, to buy their way out of consequences, as they had done for Bianca so many times before. Eleanor advised against accepting. "The restraining order protects you legally," she explained. "Without it, there is nothing preventing them from trying something like this again. And the criminal charges are not yours to drop. Those are being pursued by the state based on their actions toward the police officers." When we appeared in court for the restraining order hearing, I saw my family for the first time since the night of their arrest. My father looked smaller somehow, his usual commanding presence diminished by the formal setting where he held no authority. My mother had dressed carefully, clearly, hoping to project an image of a respectable, wronged parent. Bianca glared at me from across the courtroom, her hostility palpable even from a distance. Their attorney presented a case that nearly made me gasp with its audacity. According to him, I had invited Bianca to stay with me during a family dinner, then inexplicably changed my mind and ambushed them with police. He claimed I was mentally unstable, possibly suffering from paranoid delusions, and that my parents had only been trying to help both their daughters by facilitating a living arrangement that would benefit us both. When my turn came, Eleanor presented evidence methodically. The text messages, the security footage showing my parents and Bianca moving her things in while I was clearly at work, the documentation from the locksmith about the unauthorized key, duplication and testimony from Mrs. Patel about conversations where Bianca admitted her parents had arranged the move-in without my knowledge. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to both sides before speaking. Her ruling was unambiguous. The restraining order would be made permanent for 1 year, at which point I could request renewal if necessary. Additionally, she ordered my parents to pay restitution for the damaged and missing items, the lock replacement, and the security camera installation. "Family relationships are important," she noted in her closing comments, "but they do not supersede an individual's right to security and privacy in their own home. The actions taken here show a disturbing disregard for boundaries and personal autonomy that the court cannot condone." My parents left the courtroom without looking at me, their faces rigid with suppressed anger. Bianca shot me one last venomous glare before following them. It felt like the severing of a tie, painful but necessary, like removing a tumor that had been growing for years. The criminal proceedings followed a similar pattern. My parents received probation and community service for their charges, while Bianca, with her assault charge and previous record of petty offenses, faced more serious consequences. She was sentenced to 30 days in jail, a year of probation and mandatory counseling for anger management. Throughout this period, the reactions from extended family continued to be mixed. Most remained firmly on my parents' side, accepting their version of events without question. But there were surprising exceptions. My Aunt Sarah, my mother's younger sister, reached out with unexpected support. "Your mother has always been controlling," she told me, over coffee at a neutral location far from my apartment. She did the same thing to me when I was in college, showing up at my dorm with boxes announcing she had decided I would move back home because dorm life was too distracting. I gave in then. I am proud of you for standing your ground. Through Sarah, I learned things about my family I had never known. How my parents had financial problems they carefully concealed behind a facade of stability and success. How they had borrowed money from various family members, always with elaborate stories about temporary setbacks. How they had been pressuring relatives to take Bianca in for months before targeting my apartment. They did not want to keep supporting her, Sarah explained. But they also did not want to be the bad guys who kicked her out. You were the perfect solution from their perspective. You would provide housing and probably financial support. Bianca would be out of their house, and they could tell everyone what a beautiful example of sisterly love it was. This revelation shifted my understanding of what had happened. It had not just been about control or boundary violations, though those were certainly factors. It had also been a calculated move to transfer the burden of Bianca from themselves to me without having to admit they were unwilling to continue enabling her. The knowledge did not ease the pain entirely, but it helped me contextualize their actions. This was not just about me, it was about patterns of behavior that had existed in my family for generations. Despite the clarity brought by these revelations, the emotional toll was immense. I began having nightmares about coming home to find strangers in my apartment. I installed additional locks and security measures despite knowing logically that I was safe. I jumped at unexpected sounds and checked my security camera obsessively. After one particularly bad week, where I barely slept, Zoe convinced me to speak with a therapist. "This is trauma," she said firmly. "You need professional support to process it." Dr. Lin, a compassionate therapist specializing in family issues, helped me understand that my reactions were normal responses to having my safe space violated. We worked on coping mechanisms for the anxiety and techniques for processing the complex grief of family estrangement. "You did not cause this situation," she reminded me, in one particularly difficult session when I was questioning if I had overreacted. "You set a reasonable boundary, and they violated it repeatedly and egregiously. Taking legal action was not just justified, it was necessary for your well-being and safety." Slowly, over weeks and then months, I began to rebuild my sense of security. The legal matters settled into the background, the restraining order doing its job of keeping my family at a distance. I focused on work on rebuilding friendships that had been neglected during the crisis and on reclaiming my joy in the independence I had worked so hard to achieve. The apartment that had felt tainted by invasion gradually became mine again, each new decoration or rearrangement, a small act of reclamation. I painted over the walls where Bianca had carelessly left marks, replaced the bedding she had used, and reorganized every space that had been disturbed. It was healing this physical restoration, paralleling my emotional recovery. And through it all, I carried the hard-earned knowledge that sometimes love means setting firm boundaries, especially when those boundaries are with the people who should have taught you to have them in the first place. 6 months after the court hearings, my apartment truly felt like mine again. The new security system gave me peace of mind I had not thought possible in the early days after the invasion. A smart doorbell with video recording window sensors, and the knowledge that my landlord had explicitly banned my family members from the building all contributed to a growing sense of safety. Work became a place of solace and achievement rather than just escape. I threw myself into projects with renewed focus, my performance earning me a promotion to senior software engineer along with a significant salary increase. The financial security further solidified my independence, creating an even stronger foundation that could not be easily shaken by family manipulation. My social circle transformed as well. Some friends had drifted away during the crisis, uncomfortable with the family drama or unsure how to support me. Others stepped up in ways I never expected, becoming a chosen family that respected boundaries as naturally as breathing. Zoe and Jordan, from work my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, who began inviting me for weekly tea, and new friends from a coding meetup group, all formed a support network built on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. Through Aunt Sarah, I occasionally received updates about my family. My parents had told everyone they were giving me space to work through my issues, recasting their court-ordered distance as a generous parental decision. They never acknowledged any wrongdoing, at least not publicly. But Sarah noticed they had become more cautious about making demands of other family members, perhaps finally understanding there could be consequences for overstepping. The most unexpected development came 8 months after the arrests, when I received a letter forwarded through Eleanor's office. The handwriting on the envelope was Bianca's, and I nearly discarded it unread. After sitting with it for a day, curiosity won out. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter from a rehabilitation facility in Oregon. Bianca explained that after serving her jail time, she had enrolled in a residential program for addiction issues, problems our parents had hidden from the extended family for years. She wrote about using alcohol and later prescription drugs to cope with our parents' suffocating expectations and her own feelings of inadequacy compared to me. "I was always the screw-up," she wrote, "and you were always the one who had it together. Mom and Dad made it clear I would never measure up to you, but then turned around and acted like you owed me because you were successful. It was easier to believe them to think you had some obligation to take care of me than to face the fact that I needed to take responsibility for myself." The letter contained no direct apology for the apartment invasion, but acknowledged that her behavior had been inexcusable and driven by addiction and entitlement. She did not ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, only sharing that she was working on understanding her role in the family dynamics and learning to function independently. I had mixed feelings about this unexpected communication. Part of me was skeptical, having seen Bianca manipulate situations with apparent sincerity many times before. Another part felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps she was genuinely seeking change. I decided not to respond immediately, giving myself time to process this new information with Dr. Lin's help. "You do not owe her a response," Dr. Lin reminded me. "And if you do choose to respond someday, it should be on your terms, when you feel ready and secure in your boundaries." I tucked the letter away, neither rejecting it completely nor rushing to rebuild a bridge that had been so thoroughly burned. It was enough to know it existed, a potential opening for a different kind of relationship in the future, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and resentment. My own healing progressed steadily, if not always in a straight line. There were still difficult days when guilt would creep in, when cultural expectations about family loyalty would clash with my need for healthy boundaries. The first Thanksgiving after the estrangement was particularly hard. Social media filled with family gatherings while I celebrated quietly with friends. But even those difficult moments became opportunities for growth, as I learned to honor my feelings without being controlled by them. Perhaps the most significant change was in how I viewed relationships of all kinds. I became more discerning about who I allowed into my life, recognizing red flags I might have previously ignored. I learned to articulate my boundaries clearly and without apology, no longer fearing that setting limits would lead to abandonment. This newfound clarity extended to dating as well. After a year of focusing on my own healing, I began seeing someone who demonstrated respect for my space and independence from the first date. Alex, a software developer I met at a conference, understood the importance of boundaries in a way my family never had. When I eventually shared the full story of what had happened, his response was supportive, without being pitying angry on my behalf, without trying to take over my narrative. "Your apartment is your sanctuary," he said simply. "I would never expect access to it without your explicit invitation each and every time." Those words, so basic, yet so profound in their respect for my autonomy, confirmed I was on the right path, learning to recognize healthy relationships and walking away from those that were not. As the one-year anniversary of the apartment invasion approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. The restraining order remained in place, renewed at my request, and granted without challenge from my family. My apartment, once a site of violation and conflict, had transformed back into a haven now filled with new memories and a stronger sense of ownership. The professional boundaries I established at work led to greater respect from colleagues and management. The personal boundaries I maintained with friends created deeper, more authentic connections. And the internal boundaries I developed in therapy helped me separate my own values and needs from the expectations others tried to impose. I came to understand that protecting yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Setting boundaries is not cruel. It is an act of self-respect. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for family members with unhealthy patterns is to refuse to participate in them, even when that refusal comes at a high emotional cost. The apartment that once felt tainted by their invasion now feels more like home than ever, because I finally realized I deserve to protect what is mine, and no one, not even family, has the right to take that away. Have you ever had to take a stand against family members who violated your boundaries? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be struggling with similar situations. Remember, you deserve respect and security in your own space. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to protect your own boundaries, whatever they may be.